Rhea pressed her wedding ring against the counter and said, "I'll trade it for bread." The storekeeper's eyes dropped to the small gold band like it was a snake coiled on his boards. He didn't reach for it. His hand stayed braced on the edge of the counter, thumb rubbing the groove worn there by 100 other desperate palms. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "I don't take jewelry. You got coin?" Heat crawled up Rhea's neck, shame and hunger tangling tight in her chest. Coin. If she had coin, her hands wouldn't be shaking. Her stomach wouldn't be curling in on itself like something dying. A man leaning against the barrel of nails near the door let out a low whistle. "Pretty ring like that?" he drawled. "Lot of ways a woman might pay if she set on it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you." Laughter rippled from the 2 other cowhands by the window. Rhea kept her gaze fixed on the loaf of bread sitting behind the counter, its cracked brown top the most beautiful thing she'd seen in days. Her fingers refused to leave the ring. "Please," she said. Her voice sounded wrong to her own ears, too hoarse, too thin. "It's real gold." "My husband," the word snagged. She forced it out. "My husband left it." The storekeeper, Mr. Tally, shifted his jaw, eyes narrowing on her threadbare dress. The dust ground into the hem, the way her boots didn't quite match. The town of Clear Rock had a way of measuring strangers in a breath, of sorting who belonged and who didn't. "Real or not, I can't bite into gold," he answered. "Suppliers want cash, not stories. You bring me money, I'll bring you bread." He nudged her hand back with 2 fingers, careful not to touch the ring itself, like it carried some sickness. Rhea's throat burned. The room blurred at the edges, the neat rows of flour sacks and tins of coffee smearing into a dull haze. Behind her, she felt the weight of the men's eyes, curiosity, and something uglier mixed in. You can still walk out, she told herself. Find another way. Another town. But another town meant another day on an empty stomach, another night in the barn outside of town where she'd slept the last 2 nights, listening to the wind rattle the boards and pretending she couldn't hear her own stomach growl. "What if I work it off?" she tried. "Sweep your floors, unload your crates. I can sew. I can keep ledgers. I already got a wife and 2 boys for that," Tally cut in. He jerked his chin toward the back room, where Rhea could hear the muffled clatter of pots. "Don't need another mouth." The man by the nails pushed off the barrel, boots thudding against the plank floor as he sauntered closer. He smelled of stale beer and sweat. "I might have use for you," he said, voice dropping. "Not much call for ledgers where I'm headed, but—" Rhea stepped back, shoulder bumping the shelf of molasses jars. Glass chimed softly. Her fingers curled around the ring until the metal bit into her skin. She refused to flinch, refused to show the fear that snapped like cold along her spine. "Not again. I will not beg like that again." "Leave her be, Kane," Tally barked, but his tone held more annoyance than protection. "You want to bother girls. Take it back to the saloon." Kane's smile thinned. "She walked in here alone. Ain't my fault if she's got no one looking out for her." The bell above the door jangled. The air shifted, conversation on the street bleeding in for a heartbeat before the door thumped shut again. Boots crossed the threshold, the slow, even tread of someone who didn't hurry for anybody. Rhea didn't turn. Shame glued her in place. Let them all look. Let them see the stranger too poor to keep her own ring. "Tally," a new voice said, low and steady. "Got that feed order ready?" Something in the way the men straightened told Rhea exactly who had just walked in. Respect had a sound to it, a silence that snapped tight. "Almost colt," Tally replied. The stiffness in his tone swapped for a harried politeness. "Got 2 sacks out back. Boys are fetching the rest." Colt. Rhea let the name roll through her mind. It suited the voice, clipped, solid, with an edge that suggested iron underneath. She heard him move closer, steps bringing the scent of leather and horse and clean sweat. "Looks like you've got more than feed trouble," Colt murmured. Kane chuckled. "Just offering the lady a solution." His hand lifted, like he meant to brush Rhea's hair back to see her face. She jerked away before he could touch her. "I'm not your anything," she said, and hated the tremor in the words. "That's enough." The new voice cut through the room like a whip crack. Rhea finally turned. The man standing a few paces away wore a plain work shirt rolled to his forearms, dust on his jeans, hat slung low enough to cast his eyes in shadow. But he held himself with the kind of straight-backed certainty that didn't come from clothes. Broad shoulders, hands nicked and scarred from work, jaw rough with the start of a beard. A rancher's son, she guessed, or maybe the foreman himself. His gaze flicked once to her hand on the counter, to the ring, then up to her face. For an instant, something like surprise moved through his eyes, like he'd expected someone else. "Kane," he said, "go check on those feed sacks. Now." There was no heat in his tone, just cool expectation. Kane opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. He tipped his hat toward Rhea with a look that promised the conversation wasn't over, and shoved out the door, the other cowhands trailing after him. Silence settled, broken only by the squeak of the ceiling fan and Tally's nervous cough. Colt stepped closer to the counter. "You all right, miss?" Rhea's spine stiffened. She hated that question more than she hated hunger. "Are you all right?" As if all right were a place you could get back to with enough will. As if a single loaf of bread could fix the fact that her whole life had gone up in smoke 3 months ago. "I'm fine," she said. The words tasted like dust. "I was just leaving." "Without the bread?" he asked. Her jaw clenched. "The store doesn't take what I have." She slid the ring off the counter, a small circle of gold suddenly heavier in her palm. Her skin remembered the weight of it, the familiar groove it had left after years on her finger. It was the last piece of the life she'd meant to have. Colt's gaze ticked to Tally. "How much is the loaf?" 15 cents, the storekeeper answered. "But you don't have to." Colt was already reaching into his pocket. He laid 2 coins on the counter, the soft clink echoing in Rhea's ribcage. "Put it on my bill," he said. "And add 2 more loaves, that sack of beans. And—" his eyes skimmed the shelves. "A packet of salt." He glanced back at Rhea. "You need salt if you're planning to make anything worth eating." The words landed heavier than they should have. Rhea swallowed. "I didn't ask you to pay for me." "No," Colt agreed. "You asked to trade something." He nodded to the ring still pressed into her palm. "What did you offer him?" Her fingers curled around it instinctively. "It's mine," she said. "I can do what I want with it." "I didn't say you couldn't." His voice stayed maddeningly calm. "I asked what you offered." "My ring," she bit out. "I offered my ring for food." He refused. "So now I'm leaving." She lifted her chin, daring him to try and pity her. Tally made a small, disapproving noise. No business sense. That's what she's got. Folks don't hand over gold for bread. Makes people wonder where the gold came from. He shoved the bread into a paper sack with more force than necessary. Colt ignored him. His attention never left Rhea's face. "How long since you ate?" She wanted to lie. Pride rose up, flimsy as paper. But her stomach chose that moment to answer for her, the low, humiliating growl cutting through the quiet. Colt's jaw tightened. "Tally, hand her the bread." "Now, see here." "You got your money," Colt said, still not looking at the storekeeper. "Hand her the bread." After a beat, Tally shoved the sack across the counter. Rhea stared at it. Warmth bled through the thin paper to her fingertips when she finally grabbed it, making her throat ache. "Thank you," she managed, though it scraped her insides raw to say it to the stranger instead of the man who refused her trade. "I'll pay you back." "Didn't say you wouldn't," Colt replied. "Question is, how?" She wrapped her hand tight around the paper sack and the ring both. "I'll find a way." "There is a way," he said. Her eyes narrowed. "If you're about to say what that man did," his mouth kicked into the barest hint of a smile. "I'm not Cain, and I don't buy people. You just bought me bread." "I bought your time," he said quietly. "There's a difference." Ria's heart gave a treacherous lurch. "Why? You don't even know me. I know you walked into a store ready to trade the last thing you had that looked like it meant something." His gaze dipped to her hand again. "Most folks around here would sooner sell their horse than their wedding ring." "Maybe I don't have a horse," she shot back. "Maybe you don't have a husband either," he said, not unkindly. "Or he'd be here." His eyes softened, and the simple observation cut sharper than any insult. Ria stared at the floorboards, at the sediment of mud and dust tracked in by 100 boots. She remembered Samuel's hands, ink-stained fingers smoothing that ring onto her own. His promises of land and a little house near the river. The way he'd laughed when she'd reminded him they didn't even own a wagon yet. All gone in one feverish week, buried under a mound of stones 10 miles east of town. "I'm not asking you about him," Colt added, as if he'd seen the flicker of pain. "I'm saying it tells me something about you." She forced herself to meet his gaze again. "And what does it tell you?" "Tells me you're at the end of your rope," he said. "And that you still asked to trade, instead of just taking." He tipped his hat back enough that she could see his eyes clearly deep brown, steady. "My father runs a ranch about 5 miles outside town. We're short 2 ranch hands and a cook. Truth is, we're short on everything that can carry its own weight. If you need ranch hands," she said, "I'm not your answer. I've never broken a horse, and I can't throw a steer. I saw the way your eyes went straight to the bread the moment you walked in," he said. "You know your way around a kitchen." Her cheeks flared. "Everyone knows their way around a kitchen." "You were watching how Tally wrapped the loaves," Colt countered, "checking if they were stale. You glanced at the flour sacks to see what brand he carries. And you asked for beans before you asked for sugar. That's not everyone. That, as someone who knows how to stretch into next week what was meant to last 2 days." He wasn't wrong. Ria hated that he'd seen so much with so little to go on. "So," he said, "here's what I'm proposing instead of you handing over that ring to a man who doesn't even want it. You come out to McCall Ranch. You cook for the hands, help my sister keep the house. We'll give you a place to sleep and 3 meals a day. You work honest, you keep your ring. McCall." The name slid into place like a puzzle piece. Ria had heard it whispered around the town's one well, in the low, measuring tones folks used when talking about men with land enough to matter. "You'd hire a stranger," she said slowly, "on the strength of watching her fail to buy bread?" "I'd hire a stranger who tried to trade instead of steal," Colt said. "Who'd rather give up the last thing she has than beg." Her grip tightened on the ring until it dug half-moons into her skin. "And if I can't do it? If your hands don't like my cooking, or your father decides he doesn't want some stray woman under his roof? Then you ate for a few days and move on with a full stomach and your ring still on your finger," Colt said. "I'm not asking you to sign your life away." "Why?" The question slipped out, sharper than she intended. "Why risk it for me?" He held her gaze, something quiet but unyielding in his own. "Because gold isn't what we need," he said. "You are." The words hung there, startling in their simplicity. Ria's heart slammed against her ribs. No one had needed her in a long time. Not really. Not since Samuel S. Fever took him, and the wagon train they'd been traveling with rolled west without waiting. Tally cleared his throat loudly. "If you're done turning my store into a hiring hall, I've got work to do." Colt's mouth twitched. "We'll get out of your way." He nodded toward the door. "You coming, miss?" Ria hesitated. Her name felt like another thing she ought to keep to herself. Something small and fragile that might be stolen if she wasn't careful. But he was offering more than bread. He was offering a way to walk out of this store with her head up instead of slinking back to the half-collapsed barn on the edge of town. "Rhea Ward," she said finally. "Rhea," he repeated, like he was testing the weight of it. "Colt McCall." He tipped his hat. "You got anything left at that barn out by the creek?" Her eyes widened. "How did you—" "Only place on the edge of town, where a stranger could sleep without someone asking questions," he said. "And I saw the straw on your hem." There was no judgment in his tone, just observation. "A bedroll," she admitted. "And a tin cup. We'll swing by and get them," Colt said. "Then head out to the ranch." He picked up the sack Tally had filled with bread and beans and salt, as easily as if it weighed nothing. "You can ride with me." Rhea looked down at the ring one last time. She'd loosened it weeks ago, when the weight of it had become more reminder than comfort. Slowly, she slid it back onto her finger. The familiar metal caught for a heartbeat on her knuckle, then settled into place like it had been waiting. She took a breath that reached all the way down to the hunger-hollowed ache in her belly. "All right," she said. "I'll try." Colt's eyes warmed, the barest easing of tension along his shoulders. "Fair enough." He held the door open for her. The sun hit her like a wall, the glare off Main Street's packed dirt making her squint. The town spread out in both directions: saloon, livery, bank, church, each building a reminder of all the ways she hadn't fit anywhere in months. She stepped onto the boardwalk, with the paper sack clutched to her chest and the ring a tight circle around her finger. For the first time in weeks, there was something ahead of her other than more road. The wagon waited hitched outside the livery, a sturdy bay gelding standing patient in the traces. Colt stowed the supplies with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times, tying off ropes with quick, economical movements. Rhea watched the way his hands moved, the way he checked each knot twice. A man used to carrying weight. "Climb up," he said, chirping his chin toward the bench. "We'll head past the barn you were using, then out to the ranch." Rhea hesitated beside the wagon wheel. "You don't know anything about me," she said. "I could be lying to you about everything." "You could," Colt agreed easily. "But you know what my father says? A man's first lie shows in his eyes before it ever hits his tongue." "And what do my eyes say?" she asked, unable to resist. He studied her for a long beat. She held still under it, resisting the urge to smooth her hair or look away. "They say you're tired," he answered. "And you haven't had anyone to lean on in a long time." His gaze didn't waver. "They don't say liar." Rhea's throat tightened. She turned away abruptly and gripped the edge of the wagon, hoisting herself up onto the bench. Her muscles trembled with the effort. Hunger had a way of making even small tasks feel like steep hills. Colt circled to the other side and swung up beside her, the boards creaking under his weight. He took the reins, clicked his tongue, and the gelding started forward, hooves thudding a steady rhythm against the packed road. They rolled past the saloon with its swinging doors and tinny piano, past the smithy where sparks snapped in the dim interior. A few townsfolk glanced up as the wagon passed, eyes lingering on Rhea, the stranger beside the McCall boy. "They're going to talk," she murmured. "They always do," Colt said. "Might as well give them something worth talking about." "And what's that?" She shifted the sack of food into her lap, fingers brushing the still warm bread. "That we hired someone new out at the ranch," he replied. "And that pay hasn't run her off yet." "Yet," she echoed. He shrugged one shoulder. "He's particular, but fair." They turned onto the track that led out of town, the buildings thinning behind them. Rhea glanced back once, watching Clear Rock shrink church steeple, dusty street, the hitching rail where she'd stood yesterday, debating whether to walk into the saloon and ask if they needed help washing dishes. She hadn't gone in. She'd been too afraid of what men like Kane might read into her asking. "You said you're short a cook," she ventured, as the town slipped out of view. "What happened to the last one?" "She married one of the hands and decided she'd rather cook for one man than 12, Colt said. "Can't blame her. What about your sister?" Rhea asked. You mentioned her. Mara, he said, and there was affection woven through the syllables. She's been trying to carry the load on her own since Mrs. Hargreave left. But between chores and helping Pa with the books and wrangling my younger brothers, something had to give. You have younger brothers? Rhea turned slightly on the bench to study him. How many? 2. His mouth curved. Finn and Luke. Finn thinks he's a full-grown rancher already. Luke mostly thinks about pie. A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Rusty, but real. Pie is a noble calling. Tell him that, Colt said. He'll like you forever. The track dipped toward the creek where she'd hidden the last 2 nights. As they drew closer, Rhea's shoulders tensed. The barn squatted ahead, half its roof missing, boards warped and split. You sure you want to salvage anything from that palace? Colt asked lightly. It's what I've got, she answered. For now. He pulled the wagon to a stop beside the leaning structure. I'll give you a hand. She climbed down carefully, boots sliding a little in the dry dirt. The space beneath the barn as remaining roof felt even meaner in daylight, her bedroll tucked into the least leaky corner, her tin cup resting upside down on a flat rock, the weak attempt she'd made at hanging a scrap of cloth for privacy. Rhea knelt and rolled the blanket tight. It still held the faint scent of smoke from the last real home she'd had. She tamped down the wave of grief that always followed that thought, folding it small and tucking it away. That's all? Colt asked quietly from the doorway. That's all, she said, straightening. Lighter to leave, I suppose. He didn't offer her pity. He just took the bedroll, slung it into the wagon, and waited while she grabbed the cup. You didn't make a fire in here, he observed, glancing at the bare packed earth. Couldn't risk it, she replied. Barn like this, it'd go up faster than I could stamp it out. Smart, he said simply. She'd expected him to tease her for the caution. Most men she'd known had. The absence of mockery felt like a gift. They climbed back onto the wagon. This time, when the gelding took off, Rhea didn't look back at the sagging barn. Let it sit and rot. She was done pretending it was any kind of shelter. The land rolled out ahead of them in a slow, rising sweep sagebrush, scrub, the pale line of pasture fencing in the distance. After a while, the road split. Colt took the left fork without hesitation. How long have your family had the ranch? Rhea asked. My grandfather staked the first claim, Colt said. Back when there wasn't much out here but grass and sky. Pa doubled it before I was born. And you? She ventured. You planning to double it again? He was quiet for so long, she thought he might not answer. The reins rested easy in his hands, but she could see the flex of his fingers now and then, the subtle tension along his jaw. Land's not what it used to be, he said finally. Drought took half our herd 2 summers back. Bank took half our patience last winter. His mouth flattened. We're not in a growing season. We're in a holding-on season. Rhea understood that in her bones, the years when survival itself was the victory. That's why you need hands, she asked. And a cook? We lost some men when the money got tight, he said. Can't blame them for taking better offers. But Pa and I can't run this place alone. We need people who are willing to dig in for more than just a quick paycheck. And you think I am that? She couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. I think, Colt replied slowly, that anyone who clung to a barn with half a roof for 2 nights, instead of giving up and lying down in the road, has more grit than most. She looked down at her hands, at the faint lines of old calluses, the new blisters forming from too many days of walking. My options were barn or ditch, she said. It doesn't feel like grit. It feels like there wasn't another choice. Not choosing the ditch is a choice, he said simply. Wind tugged at the loose strand of hair near her temple. She pushed it back, watching a hawk circle lazily high above. You always talk like that? She asked suddenly. In sermons? One corner of his mouth hitched. Only when I'm trying to convince someone to climb into a wagon with me. "Lucky me," she muttered. "Lucky us," he said under his breath. She pretended not to hear. By the time the ranch house came into view, Rhea's neck ached from the wagon bench, and her legs buzzed with the familiar restless urge to keep moving. The McCall place unfolded gradually, a long, low house with a wide porch, a barn twice the size of the one she'd just left, corrals stretching off toward the hills, knots of cattle grazing in the distance. Men moved like ants around the barn and corral, their shouts and whistles carrying on the air. A dog darted between them, more noise than help. "That's home," Colt said, and the word landed heavy, full of something like pride and weariness twined together. Rhea swallowed. "It's single quotes S. large. It was supposed to be larger," he admitted. "We built for what we hoped we'd grow into." He flicked the reins, guiding the wagon toward the main house. Plans change. A woman stepped out onto the porch as they rolled closer, wiping her hands on the apron tied over her skirt. She had Colt's dark hair braided down her back and the same steady set to her shoulders. "You brought company," she called. Her eyes took in Rhea in one sweep dress, boots, the wariness she couldn't quite hide. "Mara," Colt said, pulling the wagon to a stop. "This is Rhea Ward. Rhea, my sister, Mara McCall." Rhea clutched the sack of food, acutely aware of the dust streaking her skirt and the way her hair had long since escaped its pins. "Ma'am," she said. "Mara," the woman corrected. She stepped off the porch, coming closer. Green eyes studied her face, sharp but not unkind. "You're the new cook?" "Impossibility," Rhea said honestly. Mara's mouth twitched. "Well, that's more warning than Mrs. Hargreave gave us. She just up and fell in love one Tuesday and left me holding a stew pot big enough to drown in." She shot her brother a look. "Did you at least tell P first? Or are we surprising him?" "Figured I'd show him what she can do before giving him something to argue about," Colt said easily. Mara snorted. "He'll argue anyway. Might as well feed him while he does it." She turned back to Rhea. "You cook for cowboys before?" "I cooked for a husband," Rhea said, the word catching again. "And a father. And half a town once, when the preacheress wife had a baby and the women folk decided someone else could handle the supper for a week." "That counts," Mara said firmly. "You'll have help. I've got 2 good hands and occasionally 2 small, questionably helpful ones." She looked past Rhea. "Boys!" 2 shapes barreled around the corner of the house, a lanky teenager and a younger boy with a smear of jam on his chin. They skidded to a halt when they saw Rhea, eyes wide. "Finn, Luke," Mara said. "Say hello and don't stare." "Howdy, ma'am," the older boy blurted, pushing 2 long hair out of his eyes. "I'm Finn. That's Luke. He's got pie for brains." "Do not," Luke protested, cheeks flushing. "I just like dessert." Rhea couldn't help it. A smile tugged at her mouth. "Pie for brains sounds better than no brains at all," she said. "I'm Rhea." "You're staying?" Luke asked eagerly. "That depends," she said. "How bad has the food been?" Finn made a face. "Mara does her best, but—" He darted a look at his sister and thought better of finishing the sentence. "But we've been eating things that goat might decline," Mara supplied dryly. "Come inside. I'll show you the kitchen. If you can make something edible out of what we've got, you'll be a miracle worker." Rhea climbed down from the wagon, legs stiff. She followed Mara up the porch steps, the boards creaking underfoot in a familiar, comforting way. The front door opened into a wide room with a stone fireplace and worn chairs arranged around it, boots lined neatly by the wall. It smelled of wood smoke and soap and something savory that had tried very hard to be stew. The kitchen was at the back, larger than she'd expected, with a big iron stove dominating one wall, a long table scarred by years of work, shelves lined with jars of preserves and sacks of flour. Rhea breathed in deeply. Even with the faint scent of something burned hanging in the air, it felt like stepping into the memory of every kitchen she'd ever loved. We don't have much by way of fancy ingredients, Mara said, moving to open the pantry. But Pa makes sure the basics stay stocked, even when everything else runs thin. Rhea peeked over her shoulder. Flour, beans, dried corn, a few precious bags of sugar, salt, lard, tins of baking powder, a jar of dried herbs. This is plenty, Rhea said softly. If you know what to do with it. Mara glanced at her. Do you? Rhea set the paper sack from town on the table, rolling up her sleeves. We'll find out. When do the men eat? Sunset, Mara replied. You don't have to jump in today. You've had a long. If I don't start today, Rhea cut in gently, your father will have more to question. And so will I? She met Mara's gaze. Let me try. Mara studied her for a moment, then nodded once. All right. I'll fetch water. Boys, she called, her voice snapping toward the door. You're on wood duty. And tell your father we've got company. Rhea's stomach performed an uneasy twist at that last part. The father, the man who owned all of this, the one Colt said would argue on principle. She pushed the worry down and turned to the stove, running her hand along the edge. Does the oven hold heat well? Well enough, Mara said, hefting the water bucket. She runs hot. You'll want to watch her. She paused. If you hear shouting later, don't take it personal. Pa argues with the sunrise. Good to know, Rhea murmured. When Mara left, Rhea stood alone in the kitchen, the quiet settling around her like a question. You can do this. She moved on instinct. Bread first, not the fancy loaves Tally sent, but biscuits that could stretch stew farther. She sifted flour with baking powder and salt, the familiar rhythm calming her. Lard cut into the dry mix with her fingers until it formed coarse crumbs. She poured in milk from the crock, stirring just enough to bring it together. Her hands remembered the movements, even if it had been months since Dee had enough supplies to make something more than thin soup. She dropped neat rounds of dough onto a greased pan and slid them into the oven, testing the heat with the back of her hand. Hot, but manageable. She adjusted the damper, listening to the subtle change in the stove's breathing. Next, she turned to the beans and the precious salt pork Colt had added from the larder without comment. She cut the meat into small pieces, enough to flavor the whole pot, and browned them before adding the soaked beans and water. As the beans simmered, filling the room with a rich, smoky scent, she chopped onions, saving every usable bit, and added them to the pot. A pinch of dried herbs, a careful hand with the salt. She scraped the bottom of the pan now and then, listening for the whisper that meant things were sticking. Sweat pricked the back of her neck, but she didn't slow. She mixed a simple cobbler with the last of last summer's canned peaches, layering dough over fruit, sprinkling a sparing handful of sugar on top. She moved like a woman trying to outrun a truth. If she failed here, there wasn't much road left. Voices drifted in from outside, the cadence of men coming in from the day's work. Boots hit the porch, the dog barking joyfully. A deeper voice rose above the rest, authoritative, impatient. Rhea wiped her hands on her skirt and checked the biscuits. Golden, puffed. She pulled them out and set them on the table, then turned the cobbler so it baked evenly. The beans had thickened nicely. She mashed a few against the side of the pot, letting their starch add body to the broth. The kitchen door swung open. An older man filled the frame, shoulders as broad as Colt's, but heavier with age. His hair had gone more silver than dark, lines etched deep around his mouth and eyes. He wore his authority like a second skin. "What's this I hear about my son bringing home a stray?" he demanded, gaze sweeping the kitchen before landing on Rhea. Her spine snapped straight. "If you're speaking about me, sir," she said, "I'm not a stray. I'm a guest." For now, one bushy eyebrow twitched. "Guest, is it?" Colt appeared at his shoulder, expression carefully neutral. "Pa, this is Rhea Ward. She was looking for work in town. I offered her a trial." "Without asking me," Mr. McCall said. It wasn't a question. We need the help, Colt replied evenly. Mara's been about run ragged. I can see my daughter, McCall snapped. I don't need you to tell me how tired she is. His gaze returned to Rhea, assessing. You cook? Yes, sir, she said. We'll see, he grunted, striding past her to lift the lid on the bean pot. He sniffed, then dipped a spoon in and tasted, every line of his face a study in skepticism. Rhea held her breath. McCall chewed slowly, then swallowed. Not bad, he conceded. Could use more salt. There's salt on the table, she said. He glanced at her, something like reluctant approval flickering in his eyes. Smart girl. Mara breezed in behind him, swatting his arm with a towel. Stop looming in the doorway and let folks through. Pa, if you scare off another cook, I'm feeding you cold beans for a month. Only saying what needs saying, he muttered, but he stepped aside as the hands began filing in, washing at the basin before grabbing plates. Rhea moved into the flow of serving without thinking. She ladled beans, slid biscuits onto plates, nodded when men murmured thanks. Finn and Luke hovered near the cobbler until Mara threatened to make them eat their pie last if they didn't take beans first. As the room filled with the sounds of eating and low conversation, Rhea felt something ease, just a little deep inside. This she knew how to make sure the last man through the line still got a hot biscuit, how to stretch the good bits so everyone caught at least a taste. She could feel McCall's gaze on her now and then, measuring. She kept her shoulders back and her movements steady, refusing to fidget. After a while, plates began coming back empty. Someone let out a satisfied belch that made Mara smack the back of his head. Laughter rippled. Best beans we've had in months, one of the hands said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Don't let Pa hear you, another man teased. He'll say his were better. They were, McCall said dryly. Back when I had the time to mind the pot. But Rhea didn't miss the way his mouth curved, the faint loosening of his shoulders. When the men drifted back out to finish evening chores, the kitchen quieted. Mara stacked plates, humming under her breath. Colt stayed by the door, leaning against the frame, arms crossed. Well, Mara said finally, eyeing the almost empty pot and the crumbs left on the biscuit tray. I vote we keep her. One supper doesn't prove anything, McCall countered. He set his coffee mug down with a soft thud. Anyone can pull off a decent pot of beans. Not anyone around here has in a good while, Mara muttered. Rhea straightened. Mr. McCall, she said, I appreciate you letting me cook today. If you decide you don't want me here, I'll be gone by morning. Where would you go? He demanded. Wherever the road leads, she replied. It's been leading me a lot of places I didn't choose lately. He studied her for a long moment, eyes flicking to the ring on her finger. You're married? He asked sharply. The room seemed to shrink. Rhea's hand twitched, instinctively curling inward. Widowed, she forced out. How long? 3 months. The words felt like gravel in her mouth. And your people? He pressed. You got family back east? A father, somewhere, she said. We came out together. He took work with a freight company. We parted ways when I married. She swallowed hard. Haven't seen him since, so no one to speak for you, McCall said bluntly. I speak for myself. Rhea shot back before she could stop herself. His brows rose. Mara bit back a smile behind her coffee cup. That so? McCall asked. You willing to work hard, Rhea Ward? This isn't some boarding house kitchens. You'll be up before dawn, feeding men who put in 12 hours before they sit down again. I've been working hard my whole life, she said. Only difference is whether the work feeds me too. Silence stretched. Colt's jaw flexed, but he said nothing, letting the moment hang. Finally, McCall grunted. We'll see how you feel after a week. Relief washed through her so fast it made her dizzy. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet, he replied. This is a trial. And I don't pay in advance. His gaze sharpened suddenly. Where'd you get that ring? Ria's heart stuttered. My husband, she said. He gave it to me when we married. What was his name? Samuel Ward. McCall's eyes narrowed, studying the ring itself now, the simple band, the small engraving along the inside edge. Mind if I see it? Every instinct screamed no. That ring had been the last bit of Samuel she'd been able to hold when the sickness took everything else. But refusing outright would raise more questions. Of course, she said, keeping her voice level. Slowly, she slid the ring off and placed it in his outstretched palm. He turned it between thick fingers, squinting at the inside. His face, already weathered into lines of habitual frown, changed. Something like recognition flashed across his eyes, sharp and unmistakable. Where did you say your husband got this? He asked, voice gone quiet and dangerous. Ria's gut twisted. He never told me, she admitted. Only said it came from a man who owed him more than money. McCall looked up, gaze pinning her in place. The kitchen, warm moments ago, felt suddenly airless. You lying to me, girl? He asked. No, sir, she said, forcing herself not to flinch. That's the truth. He closed his fist around the ring, knuckles whitening. For a heartbeat, Ria thought he might throw her out that second, tell her to take her pot of beans and bedroll and walk back to town. Instead, he opened his hand slowly and set the ring on the table between them. It glinted in the lamplight, suddenly ominous. You got a right to know something, he said, voice low. Because that exact ring, shouldn't be on your finger at all. Ria's pulse roared in her ears. What do you mean? McCall met her gaze, the weight of his stare as heavy as any hand on her shoulder. Because, Ria Ward, he said, each word measured. That ring belongs to a man I've been waiting 15 years to see again. And the last time I saw it, it wasn't on a woman's hand. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. Ria stared at the ring on the table and forgot how to breathe. A moment ago, it had just been Samuel's last promise. Now it sat between her and Eli McCall like a loaded gun, small and bright and dangerous. What do you mean it shouldn't be on my finger? She asked. McCall lowered himself into the nearest chair like his legs had given out. The wood creaked. He didn't touch the ring. He only watched it, jaw working. Colt stayed by the doorway, arms folded. Mara froze by the sink, towel dangling from her fingers. Even the stove's soft ticking sounded loud. 15 years, McCall said finally. That's how long since I last saw that man. His weathered gaze lifted to Ria. You sure you want to know why it matters? Her knees felt hollow. She made herself stand straight. It's already on my hand, she said. Too late to look away now. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. You said your husband got it from a man who owed him, McCall went on. What else did he tell you? Memory crowded up Samuel by the campfire, fever already shining faint in his eyes, fingers clumsy as he turned the ring on his own hand. We were 3 days east of here, Ria said slowly. Camped with a wagon train. A stranger came in near dark. No wagon, no pack. Just a satchel and a coat too heavy for the heat. Samuel talked with him by the fire. Her throat tightened. He came back with that ring. Said the man couldn't pay in money, so he handed over something that meant more than coin. Did he give a name? McCall asked. No, she said. Just that the man knew yours. He said, there's a rancher east I owe more than money. If he ever sees this ring again, tell him I didn't forget. McCall's fingers curled on his knees. His gaze stayed on the gold. Describe him, he said. Tall, Ria answered. Lean. Dark hair with gray at the temples. Scar by his left eye. He kept rubbing his right thumb like it hurt. He looked warm, like a man past the point of turning back. Colt swore under his breath. Mara inhaled sharply. McCall picked up the ring at last. The lamp caught on the tiny engraving inside. "Jonah Hawley," he said, voice flat. "That coward?" Ria's heart jumped. "You knew him." "I built this place with him," McCall said. "He was my partner, my best friend." His mouth twisted. "And the man who walked onto my land 15 years ago in the middle of the night loaded half our cattle into wagons and disappeared. He set the ring back down carefully, like he didn't trust his own grip. He left a note on my table with 2 words. I'm sorry." The picture sank into Ria's bones-empty pens at dawn. Dust where a herd should be, a man's trust ripped up like old fencing. "We took a loan together to expand," McCall said. "He stole the herd and the papers proving we'd paid most of it back. Bank said without those papers, the whole note stood like we'd never touched it." His gaze cut to hers. "That ring was proof he'd once meant to stand beside me. It turned into proof I was a fool." Ria swallowed. "Samuel didn't know any of that," she said. "If he had, he would have thought twice before taking it." "I don't blame your husband," McCall said, surprising her. "A man on the road takes what payment he can. But understand something, Miss Ward." His voice roughened. "That band ties you to the worst mistake I ever made." Heat crawled up her neck shame for something that wasn't hers. "If you want the ring back," she said, nodding at it, "take it. It was never mine to begin with." He studied her hand, the pale strip of skin where the ring usually sat. "You married a man who wore it," he said. "That makes it yours as much as his. Whether I like the history or not." His eyes sharpened. "But a woman under my roof doesn't get to keep secrets about the ghost she's dragging in." Her spine stiffened. "I'm not dragging any ghost on purpose." "Doesn't matter," McCall said. "It followed the ring. And now it's here." He leaned forward. "You stay, you work. You eat at my table fine. We need the help. But as long as you're on McCall land, I expect the truth. About that man. About anything your husband said, even if it seems small. If I find out you lied or held something back on purpose." His voice dropped. I'll see you off this ranch myself and make sure every rancher from here to the border hears why." Fear scalded her, but beneath it, something dug its heels in. "I won't lie to you," she said quietly. "Not about something that can hurt the people feeding me. I'll tell you anything I remember, even if it makes me look foolish. But I won't be punished for what Jonah Hawley did." For a beat, the room held its breath. Mara's mouth twitched like she was hiding a smile. Colt's gaze warmed. McCall stared at Ria as if seeing the shape of her for the first time thin as a fence rail, eyes too tired for her age, and steel running clean through the middle. He pushed the ring toward her with 2 fingers. "Then keep it," he said. "Wear it, pocket it, tie it to your boot. I don't care. Just don't lose it." Her hand shook as she picked it up. The gold felt warmer than it had any right to. She slid it back onto her finger. The small circle settled into its familiar groove like it had been waiting. "You've done enough for tonight," McCall said gruffly, standing. "Mara will show you where to sleep. You'll need your strength if you aim to cook for this crew at dawn." It wasn't kindness exactly, but it wasn't rejection. Ria nodded. "Yes, sir." Mara looped an arm through hers. "Come on," she said. Before he remembers another question to ask. The small room at the end of the back hall held a narrow bed, a washstand, and a peg on the wall. That was all. It still stole Ria's breath. 4 solid walls, a real mattress, a door she could close. "We aired it out," Mara said, striking a match and lighting the candle. "Sheets are clean. Water's fresh." Ria ran her hand over the faded quilt. Her throat closed around unexpected tears. "Thank you," she managed. "How long since you had a room to yourself?" Mara asked quietly. Ria let out a low laugh. "Depends if you count the back of a wagon." "I don't," Mara said. "Wagons are for leaving. Rooms are for roots." Roots. The word tugged at something sore and hopeful inside Ria. 3 months, she admitted. Since before Samuel took sick. Mara's face softened. I'm sorry, she said. For him, and for the road since. Rhea could only nod. You work hard here, Mara went on. But you're allowed to miss what you lost. Pa forgets that grief doesn't listen to chores. She smiled faintly. I don't. That gentle assurance almost undid her more than any threat. I don't know how not to work, Rhea confessed. If I stop moving, the missing catches up. Then we'll keep you busy, Mara said. There's no shortage of work. But not tonight. Sleep while you can. Morning comes early. She hesitated at the door. I'm glad you're here, Rhea. The words landed like a blanket around her shoulders. I'm glad to be, Rhea said, surprised to realize it was true. When Mara left, Rhea washed road dust from her face, stripped down to her shift, and slid between cool sheets. The mattress dipped beneath her weight. She lay stiff at first, listening floorboards creaking, a murmur of voices, the dog barking outside. She almost let herself drift. Then she heard footsteps pause outside her door, and the low rumble of male voices, McCall and Colt. She held still. You brought more than flour back today, McCall was saying. We needed more than flour, Colt replied. You saw what she did in there with that ring. I saw Jonah's band on her finger, McCall snapped. I saw 15 years of trouble walk into my kitchen on a stranger's hand. Colt's answer came steady. I saw a woman who tried to trade the last thing she owned for bread instead of stealing it. A beat of silence. Her eyes didn't look like a liar's, McCall admitted grudgingly. They looked like someone at the end of her rope who still chose to tie a knot, Colt said. The boards creaked as McCall shifted. I won't punish her for what Jonah did, he said. But I won't let my guard down either. No one's asking you to, Colt said. Just don't send her back to that half-rotten barn if we don't have to. Mara's already breathing easier with someone else in the kitchen. Another pause. We'll see, McCall muttered. If she pulls her weight, she stays. If not, road's still there. His voice softened a fraction. Get some sleep, boy. Tomorrow will be a long day either way. Their steps moved off. Rhea let out a slow breath into the dark. They were weighing her like they'd weigh a horse or a new plow cost, risk, usefulness. It should have stung more than it did. Instead, oddly, it steadied her. They weren't pitying her. They were deciding if she could stand as part of the load. You asked for work, she reminded herself. Now prove you can carry it. She slipped her hand under the pillow, fingers closing around the ring. Whatever you were supposed to be, she whispered to the ghost of Jonah Hawley, I'll turn you into something that feeds people instead of starving them. She fell asleep with that vow lodged under her ribs. The rooster yanked her from sleep in the gray before dawn. Every muscle complained as she dressed, but the aches felt honest, not hopeless. She smoothed her hair back, tied it in a knot, and followed the smell of coffee down the hall. Mara stood at the stove, poking resentfully at a pot of plain oats. Morning, she said around a yawn. You don't have to start first thing, you know. We could have. If I don't, Rhea said, rolling up her sleeves, your father will think I'm soft. And he'd be right. What have you got? Oatmeal again, Mara groaned. If I serve it plain one more morning, Finn might mutiny. Rhea peered into the pantry molasses, a nearly empty tin of raisins, a scrap of cinnamon. We can fix that, she said. Mara watched as Rhea poured in a ribbon of molasses, scraped the last raisins into the pot, and dusted the oats with cinnamon. The smell shifted warm, rich, like something worth waking for. Well, I'll be, Mara murmured. Toast yesterday's biscuits in the skillet, Rhea said. And we'll scramble a few eggs with what's left of the salt pork. That and sweet oats will keep men on their feet till noon. By the time boots thudded on the porch, the kitchen was full of steam and the low comfort of shared work. Finn barreled in first, sniffed, and grinned. Luke's eyes went wide. It smells like town bakery, he declared. McCall stepped in behind them, hat pushed back. His eyes swept the stove, the table, Ria's flour-dusted hands. "You sleep?" he asked. "Enough," she said. He grunted, which she was beginning to understand meant approval he refused to name. Colt came last, the morning chill still clinging to his shirt. His gaze found her quickly. "You didn't waste any time," he said. "I said I'd earn my keep," she replied. The hands trickled in, filling the long table. McCall muttered a brief thanks, and the room fell on the food. Ria watched out of the corner of her eye as men's faces changed surprise, then satisfaction. Someone let out a low whistle. "If I'd known oats could taste like this," one hand said, "I'd have stopped cussing them years ago." Mara jabbed him with the handle of a spoon. "You better not go giving Ria all the credit. I've been boiling those same oats for months." "And boiling is all you've been doing," Finn muttered. Mara swatted him, but she was smiling. McCall took a bite, chewed, and nodded once. "Better," he said. Ria hid her smile in the coffee pot. When the bowls were empty and men were heading for the door, McCall called over his shoulder, "Ria, when the dishes are done, come to my office." Her stomach fluttered. "Yes, sir." Mara bumped her shoulder once they were alone. "Don't fret," she said. "If he meant to fire you, he'd do it in the yard where there's room for stumping. Office means numbers. Numbers I can do," Ria said. McCall's office smelled of ink and dust and stubbornness. Shelves bowed under ledgers. The desk was buried under papers, and a coffee cup ringed with brown. He pushed a thick book toward her. "Main ledger," he said. "Every cow, every dollar." "Or near enough. You said you kept books for your father." "Helped," she corrected. "He checked my sums till he trusted me." She laid a hand on the worn leather. "What do you need from me?" His eyes were tired but steady. "A clearer view of the hole I'm standing in," he said. "Bank's been sending notices that don't match what my gut tells me. I need more than gut." He opened the ledger to a marked page. Columns of neat, cramped writing marched down the paper. "Loan with the bank," he said. "Taken when Jonah and I decided to expand. Paid on it 10 years before he ran. After he left, their numbers changed." Ria scanned the entries. Payment dates, amounts, notations of cattle driven to the railhead instead of cash. "You paid part in stock," she said. "Didn't have coin some seasons," McCall said. Drove a string in, signed them over. His mouth tightened. "Bankman said they'd credit fair market value. Do they?" Ria asked. He slid a bundle of folded statements across the desk. "That's what they claim." She lined a statement beside his ledger. Within minutes, her stomach was gnawing for a different reason. "They're crediting less than you sent," she murmured. "Here $200 worth of cattle marked as 80. And this year, they've written payments down as interest only when you sent more than what interest would have been." She looked up. "They're treating part of what you send as fees." "Fees for what?" McCall demanded. "Existing while owing them money," she said dryly. "Drafting papers. Holding notes. Whatever words look respectable in ink." She tapped the columns. "But the bottom line is, they're using your confusion over the missing papers to keep the principal fat." His jaw bunched. "You sure?" "As sure as I can be from one morning's look," she said. "Give me a day, and I can match it line by line. But the pattern's there." She drew a quick list on a blank page, dates, amounts, what McCall had recorded versus what the bank claimed. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That if you walk into that bank alone, Mr. Porter will talk circles until you doubt your own book," she said. "But if you walk in with this," she tapped the list, "and someone who can point to each difference, he'll have to answer." He watched her, eyes narrowing. "You offering to be that someone?" he asked. Fear prickled along her spine at the thought of polished counters and men in vests who smelled like cologne and superiority. She thought of the sagging barn, of Mara's worn face, of McCall's shoulders bowed under more weight than cattle. Yes, she said, if you want me there. A corner of his mouth twitched. Take sand to pick a fight with a bank, he said. We ride in tomorrow. Her breath caught. Tomorrow? Bankman's due out here with another notice next week, he said. I'd rather meet him on his own ground first. Rhea swallowed, thumb finding the ring on her finger. All right, she said. Tomorrow. The next morning, Rhea sat in the back of the wagon between a crate of eggs and a sack of grain, while Colt drove and McCall held the ledger like a weapon. Clear Rock's bank looked even more out of place than usual bricked front, tall windows, polished door in a town of dust and boards. Rhea's stomach flipped as they stepped inside. Cool air met them, smelling of ink and paper. A long counter cut the room in half. Behind it, clerks moved with stiff efficiency. Mr. Porter looked up and pasted on a business smile. Mr. McCall, he said. Again. We need to talk, McCall said. About my account. He jerked his chin toward Rhea. This is Rhea Ward. She works for me. She's been through my books. She has questions. Porter's gaze slid over her plain dress, mended cuffs, and dismissed her in an instant. Mrs. Ward, he said, I'm sure whatever concerns you have, I can. There are payments you've marked as interest that should have gone to principal. Rhea cut in before nerves could seal her tongue. And cattle valued far under what the railhead posted that season. I've listed them. She set the ledger and her notes on the counter. Porter blinked, not used to being interrupted. Banking is a complex. It's numbers, she said. Her voice surprised her steady, not loud. Numbers either add up or they don't. Colt's lip twitched. McCall's shoulders seemed to square a hair more. Porter's smile thinned. Our ledgers are reviewed by the board, he said. If there were any errors, there are, Rhea said. She tapped a line with one finger. Here, Mr. McCall drove cattle worth $200. You credited 80. Here, and here another tap. You recorded his payments as interest only, even though he sent more than the interest due. Where did the rest go? A flush rose under Porter's collar. Livestock values fluctuate, he said stiffly. And fees? Fees you never itemized, she said. If there's an honest explanation, we'd like to see it. If there isn't, we can take both sets of books to the magistrate and ask him why your totals don't match. She held his gaze. Your choice. The hum of the bank faltered. A clerk dropped a pen. No one moved. Porter stared at Rhea like he misjudged the depth of a creek and just realized it mid-crossing. I'll need to review these, he said at last. Properly. In my office. He gathered the papers, fingers tight, and nodded toward a couple of chairs. Wait there. Rhea's knees wanted to buckle with relief and fresh dread. She sat beside McCall, hands clasped hard in her lap. Behind the door, Porter disappeared through. Voices rose sharp, muffled. Words like misapplied and audit leaked out. Rhea fixed her eyes on a knot in the floorboards and counted her breaths. When Porter finally emerged, his hair was slightly mussed. Mr. McCall, he said, it appears. There have been errors. The words sounded like they hurt. McCall's brows climbed. Have there? A former clerk misallocated some of your payments, Porter said tightly. They were credited to interest-only accounts and fees instead of reducing your principal. We will be correcting the balance. How much? McCall asked. Does that leave? Porter named a number. Hope flared, cautious but real. The mountain was still there, but smaller. You will receive updated statements, Porter said, and I'll personally oversee your account going forward. His eyes darted to Rhea, to prevent further misunderstandings. That would be wise, she said. He didn't answer. His jaw worked. They stepped out into sun bright enough to make Rhea squint. McCall let out a long breath. I'd say I'm surprised, he said, but I ain't. Just mad it took me this long to drag it into the open. Looked at Rhea. You did good in there. My hands were shaking, she admitted. Porter didn't see it, Colt said, grinning. He was too busy sweating. Back at the ranch, Mara met them on the porch, eyes wide. "Well?" she demanded. "The bank admitted errors," McCall said. Mara's jaw dropped. "Porter said he was wrong?" "Near enough," Colt said. Rhea pinned him with his own numbers. Mara threw her arms around Rhea with a whoop. "I knew I liked you," she said fiercely. "You made a bankman flinch. Dinner's on me tonight." "Dinner's on both of us," Rhea said, breathless. That night at supper, laughter sat easier around the table. McCall told a short story about Jonah getting chased by a bull years back. The anger in his voice had softened at the edges, surprise hiding inside it, like he wasn't sure how to talk about the man without heat. Rhea listened, fingers resting on her ring. Jonah Hall, coward and partner, thief and man who'd sent his last real possession away with a stranger. The world refused to sort itself into simple columns. After dishes, she lingered in the kitchen, wiping the same patch of table longer than necessary. Her thoughts kept circling back to the ring and to McCall's face when Porter admitted the bank had been wrong. Colt appeared in the doorway, shoulder propped against the jamb. "You're wearing grooves in that wood," he said. "It's seen worse," she said. "Pa thinks you hung the moon," Colt went on. "He won't say it like that, but trust me." Warmth pricked behind her eyes. "I didn't hang anything," she said. "Just read numbers." She hesitated. "But if it buys this place some breathing room, then maybe the road didn't spit me out here by accident." Colt's gaze softened. "I don't think it did." Before she could answer, McCall's voice came from the parlor. "Rhea, Colt. In here a minute." They found him staring into the cold fireplace again, ledger closed on the table beside him. He looked tired, but some of the desperate tension Rhea had first seen was gone. "You said there might be more to what that coward told your husband," McCall said without preamble. "Better I hear it now than in pieces." Rhea wet her lips. "That night by the fire," she said, "Jonah told Samuel he'd spent years blaming you. The bank, bad luck, anything but himself." She held McCall's gaze. "He said he finally had to admit he'd run because he was more scared of men in suits than he was of losing the man who stood beside him. He thought if he stole what he could and got out, he'd feel free. Said every year since it proved he only traded one chain for another." McCall's face barely moved, but his fingers tightened on the arms of his chair. "He told Samuel," Rhea finished softly, "that if you ever saw the ring again, you should know he was sorry. He wasn't braver. That you deserved a better partner than the one he turned out to be." Silence gathered like dust. Colt looked at his father, worry and something like pity in his eyes. "I figured as much," McCall said at last, voice rough. "A man doesn't rob his friend and sleep sound after. Not if he ever had a decent bone in him." He looked at the ring on Rhea's hand. "Still doesn't give me my cattle back." "No," Rhea said. "But it means he knew what he did. Sometimes that matters." "To you?" McCall asked. She thought of Samuel's last apologies, of her father's long silences. "Some days," she said. "Some days it just hurts different." He huffed a quiet sound that might have been a laugh. "Either way," he said, "I don't want that band back." Rhea blinked. "You don't?" "It's been an anchor on my anger long enough," McCall said. "If Jonah meant it as collateral between us, consider his account closed. He paid in fear and regret. That's coin enough." His gaze was very direct. "Let it be yours now, not his." "Not mine." Emotion rose sharp in her chest. "You're sure?" she asked. "I'm sure," he said. "I'd rather look at it and remember the day we made a banker sweat than the night I woke up to empty pens." He cleared his throat. "You've done more in 2 days than some hands do in a year. As far as I'm concerned, you've got a place here as long as you want one." The words hit her harder than any storm. As long as you want one. The road in her mind forked. Keep moving, never belong, never risk losing anything again. Or stop. put her hands into this stubborn piece of land and these stubborn people, knowing it could hurt later. I do want one, she said slowly. Place here. She swallowed. If you're sure. I just said I was, McCall replied. Don't make me repeat myself. Colt's smile was small and bright. Later, in the quiet of her room, Rhea turned the ring between her fingers. You caused a world of trouble, she murmured to the band, thinking of Jonah. But you also led me to a kitchen where the pots are full and the books aren't lying anymore. She thought of Samuel, of his hand shaking as he pressed the ring into hers. You told me to find the man who knew this ring, she whispered. I did. He's loud and stubborn and kinder than he wants to be. And somehow I ended up with a roof instead of just an answer. She slid the ring back onto her finger. This time it felt less like a shackle to dead men and more like a small, solid promise to herself. To stand, to work, to be needed. Out in the dark, the ranch settled. Mara laughed softly in the next room. Finn and Luke's muffled argument over who got the top blanket drifted down the hall. Somewhere, McCall turned over with a little less weight on his chest. And Colt lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of the woman who had walked into Tally, store ready to trade her ring for bread, and wondering when exactly the thought of her had started feeling like hope instead of complication. Rhea curled onto her side, hand resting over the ring. For the first time in months, she didn't fall asleep planning how to survive the next day. She fell asleep wondering what she might build. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.